Hi, in this video, I want to explain in simple terms the formula that underlies recent tariffs imposed by President Trump on basically all countries in the world except a few. It's this formula. In a way, it's kind of cool because it's not every day we get to see a math formula coming out from the White House. The formula is actually really straightforward, but it became confusing because President Trump called it something else. He called it tariffs charged to the USA as seen in this picture. What I'll do in this video is to unpack and explain the formula in simple terms, very little math, just a little algebra from like middle school. Here's the statement from the Office of the US Trade Representative where they show the formula. First thing I want you to do is not be stressed out over the Greek letters. You're not alone. My teaching experience is that whenever I include Greek letters in my formulas or equations, other than pi, people are okay with pi. But if I include other Greek letters, there will sometimes be students who just freeze up. Don't be, it's just the letter. The second thing I want to point out is this star symbol here, the asterisk. It just means multiplication. In Excel and Google Sheets and most computer programming languages, when you multiply numbers, we don't use the dot or the X, we use star. Now let's go into details. Let's read this statement. Consider an environment in which the US levies a tariff of rate tau sub I on country I, and delta tau sub I reflects the change in the tariff rate. This here is the Greek letter tau. Tau is a Greek equivalent of our letter T. You can think of it as T short for tariff. The triangle here, which is a Greek letter delta, represents change. In this situation, delta tau means change in tau, change in tariff. And it equals how much the US will increase the tariff by. What's most important in this sentence is the letter I. It represents the country that they are considering tariff for. The letter I shows up in the formula as subscript. Here, 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 and here. The letter I means the country, different I's for different countries. These four quantities that have subscripts, that means they have their own values for each country. This delta tau with subscript I would be how much tariff would charge for that country. For China, it's a different delta tau. For Pakistan, it's a different delta tau. For the European Union, it's a different delta tau. You can think of the subscript I as the name of the country. Let's move on. This letter X with subscript I represents total exports from the US to that country. The letter M with subscript I represents total imports into US from that country. The M subscript I appears again down here. That leaves two Greek letters. This is epsilon. It's like our letter E. It represents the elasticity of imports with respect to import prices, meaning how much do we import less when import prices go up, or how much we import more when import prices go down. I'm not going into the theory about elasticity because, as you'll see, it turns out not to be important. This is the Greek letter phi or phi. Different people pronounce it differently. It's like our letter PH or F. According to this memo, it represents pass-through from tariffs to import prices, meaning if tariff goes up by $100, then how much will the import prices change? Now comes the key part of this formula, and the reason why I said we didn't need to go into the economic theory of the epsilon or the phi, the elasticity or the pass-through rate, because the epsilon and phi don't come with subscript I. They are the same number for all countries. In math, we say they're constant. epsilon is a constant, is a fixed number. Phi is a constant, is a fixed number. What fixed numbers are they? We'll scroll down on the memo by the trade representative and we find this. They have some explanation. They say they use data from the US Census Bureau for 2024. And then they say this. They say epsilon equals 4. Down here they say phi equals 0.25. Epsilon and phi are fixed. The same values, 4 and 0.25, are used for all countries. Let's go back to the formula and plug in those values. Here's the formula. And we're given epsilon equals 4, phi equals 0.25. Epsilon times phi equals 4 times 0.25 equals 1. All of this is just 1. Plug it in. 1 times m is just m. This whole formula boils down to just this. Now, x is export and m is import. So in words, the formula is change in tariff for this country equals export to it minus import from it divided by import from it. Now, what's the numerator equal to? What is export minus import? How much we export to a country minus how much we import from them. That's our trade surplus. And if it's negative, it's a trade deficit. The numerator divided by total import, so that's trade deficit divided by total import. The fraction equals trade deficit percent. What this formula says is the tariff will increase by whatever the trade deficit percent is. That's it. That's the end of the formula. Let's apply the formula to China. Here's the information from the Census Bureau. The total export is x sub I and the total import is m sub I are down here in the total 2024. Plug the numbers in the formula. Exports minus imports divided by imports equals negative 0.672, etc. times 100% equals negative 67%, meaning a 67% deficit. Let's go back to this picture of President Trump. That's the 67% that shows up on this column for China. What President Trump did after that was, instead of increasing tariffs equal to the trade deficit percent like the formula says, he gave a discount. It says discounted right here on the chart that he was showing. The discount turns out to be 50% off. For China, the formula comes out 67%. If you look at the next column, half of 67% is 33.5%, which rounds to 34%, and that's the additional tariff that was imposed. Let's do it again for the next line, the European Union. Here's the information from the Census Bureau. Plug the numbers into the formula. Equals rounded to negative 39% or 39% deficit. That's the number on the chart. And then at 50% off, half of 39% is 19.5, which rounds to 20%. That's all there is to the formula. It looks like a lot of math, but at the end of the day, it's just equal to the trade deficit percent. Now, there's a little detail I want to mention. Let's go back to the memo by the US Trade Representative. Up here, they say epsilon is a negative number. But down here, they say epsilon equals 4, which is a positive number. But that's okay. All that the negative part does is that it fixes the trade deficit in the numerator. Let's go back to the example with China. The numerator is negative, meaning there's a deficit. And we actually want the tariff to be positive. So we put a negative in the denominator so that negative divided by negative is positive. If there's a trade deficit, the tariff will increase. The negative is there to make sure there is that inverse relationship. Deficit, tariffs increase. So that's it. That's the formula. is just equal to percent trade deficit. And by the way, the epsilon and the phi here, they have everything to do with our import market and our tariffs. They've got nothing to do with any tariffs that the other country may or may not have on us. Unless you ideologically define trade deficit as trade barrier. Otherwise, this formula is unrelated to their barriers. All right, hope that helps. Any comments or questions? Put it in the comments section below. Like, share, and subscribe for more contents. And thanks for watching. Bye.